Our aim was to create a plant with a scent that makes its owner happy.
We are entering a new era here.
Yeah, Little Joe.
Directed by Jessica Hausner, Austrian filmmaker, I believe. Yeah, Austrian filmmaker and screenwriter who studied with Michael Haneke, who needs no introduction.
Nice.
Film stars Emily Beecham and Ben Whishaw. Emily Beecham from the recent movie Daphne. Film was co-written with Hausner's usual collaborator, Géraldine Bajard or Bayard. Thoughts?
I liked it. I think there were parts of it that I think it could have been better, but I did definitely like the film. The one thing that I did point out and we did discuss earlier was the aesthetic and the design of the film was amazing. There were parts in the film that I thought could be a little bit necessarily like OTT in some ways, and obviously we can delve into that later. I quite like the idea of sort of like the whole mixing of like the coming of age, flowers blossoming, that kind of like Yonic feel of like the flower opening up. You did say it was a reference to like an old film that it was like it had like a starlight. It was
Invasion of the Body Snatchers.
Yeah, and what was
in a Q&A before the actual film, she said that was a big reference for her.
No, definitely. One thing, I think the main actress in it, she was good.
Emily Beecham.
I think she was really good, Emily. When the writer was talking in the Q&A saying that she wanted to do a real subtle performance, I definitely did see that with Emily's sort of like character and her sort of like her composition in the film. But then I think that maybe some of the other actors in it didn't really read quite well with them together on the screen. But that's just something that I picked up.
I didn't think it was subtle at all. I thought what she was going for was more of a kind of pointed melodrama acting, and that melodrama not being a pejorative, but she was trying to do a take on the 50s and 70s movies of like the Revenge of Nature and sort of 50s sci-fi like Invasion of the Body Snatchers, the novel Day of the Triffids.
That's it. That's the one that I was
Little Shop of Horrors. Yeah, the Mark Commode's Guardian review. The Day of the Triffids meets Little Shop of Horrors. He gives it 4 stars out of 5. Yeah, which I disagree with. But as regards to the performances, she was good. I agree with that. And I actually think she was great in Daphne, and I didn't like Daphne at all. I didn't like the screenplay or the direction. I just didn't like many other the supporting actors. But she was really good in it, and I feel sorry for her. That sounds patronizing, but I mean like she's brilliant, and I think she felt unsupported in Daphne, and she, for my money, felt unsupported in this movie as well. Which brings us to Ben Whishaw.
Why do you think she felt unsupported?
In this film. Well, unsupported by lacking elements is what I mean. Like her good performance was, I don't want to sound flippant, but was like almost put to waste in a way, because I felt like the script wasn't there, the direction wasn't there really. I mean, the camera work is something we can get into, but she and Ben Wishaw's hammed up. Also, just the Irish guy, I can't remember the kid. Like all of it was so over the top, and I think at least Beecham understood she understood the references to the older movies and the older way of acting, but she played it with like a modernness, like
she played it with some kind of authenticity, I guess. And I think the one thing that is very clear, I really liked the film. I think I liked it mostly for style reasons. I think it shows like a director that's kind of playful and maybe too playful at times, maybe too aware that she is a director and can make directorial decisions, to sort of, just maybe sometimes too pretentious, but it was very clear that it was an Austrian character speaking in English, and I think that's what made the performances feel just slightly off. And I think we were left wondering, is that part of the style, or is it just a sort of performance issue?
I think it's both. I think it's an issue with the dialogue in the script, but it's also like the dialogue was supposed to be very. It's hard to explain. It comes through in Fassbinder's sci-fi movie, Word on a Wire. I think it's actually a 2-part TV thing, but it has in also all of Fassbinder's movies, like it has this kind of awareness of its falsity in a way, like it's robotic, and it's like it's almost like that movie Submarine by Richard Ayoade, but like or almost, in fact, scrap that reference, but it's more like Killing of a Sacred Deer and Dogtooth and that sort of like monotone. Yeah. But it just didn't.
Do you think, obviously, this sort of like
less so,
the monotony of like the acting style? Do you think that was something that she, or the director was aware of, or do you think that it was one thing for the lead actor Emily, and then the others didn't really have that sort of like. It's sort of like incentive to do that.
Well, I thought she was the least robotic.
I think that she wanted to make her character more real, if anything.
And maybe that's where the tension was.
Exactly, because it was very clear that it was a directorial decision to be kind of robotic in performance. But Emily Beecham managed to make a performance robotic and also really authentic at the same time, which is why she was great. But at the same time, it just clashed with everyone else, because not everyone else could do that, especially when you don't have a character that's a little bit more complex, that has more screen time, blah, 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 blah. So it's like you can't really expect secondary characters to do that. And so it just felt
But that's why it has to be done in the writing as well.
Yeah. So it just kind of felt like just like slightly off.
Yeah, I think for me, since Emily's performance was quite strong, and then some of the other performances did feel very sort of like BBC at its best in a way.
Yeah, I was about to say that. Like, feels like a good Doctor Who episode.
So it was these two things of like this kind of like real sort of like subtle art house form, and then this Doctor Who, coming
very one note acting, especially the. I can't remember the character's name, but the older woman who has the dog. Oh, her name was Bella, right?
Yeah, Bella. Yeah, Bella.
Bella and Bello. But yeah, she was like something out of a BBC drama. It's like, okay, everyone at home understands, and that. I mean, I don't think it's. I'm saying the BBC often patronizes home viewers by making their characters very one note, so they're simple to understand. But yeah, I mean, Wishaw, we. Maybe disagree on that. What do you reckon? What did you see in that performance?
I think I personally I like Wishaw. I really do like Wishaw. I do think that at the beginning of the film, I feel he did sort of like match her in the sort of like understate acting styles. I think in terms of some direction with certain things being thrown at him in the camera. I think it sometimes did go a little bit sort of like OTT in some places, but I did think that, there was a subtlety with Wishaw. I think it's just he's got something in his eyes, which I do like, but I understand. What do you think anyway? What don't you?
I just thought it was way... it was just really hammy. I can't really describe it another way. I just felt like, again, I think it's a problem with the script. Like... Somebody that I know recently saw Surge, the film that he's in, that just played Sundance, and he won Best Actor for it at Sundance, which I haven't seen yet because it's not in release. But that person who saw it told me that he's terrible in it. Like he's not good in it. It's like so over the top, and he plays like this eccentric kind of guy. He's like very twitchy and I think that's what in this movie he was like. He was like too. He made his character too weird, like too like. Yes. How are you? Like too like robotic, like an old movie character that's like almost like Yuan from 2001, Dave from 2001, the computer. You know, I'm sorry, I can't do that.
Like a kind of Black Mirror. That kind of led me to the point of...
Wait, Hal. His name's Hal. He says, I'm Dave, I can't do that for you. Sorry, Hal.
Yeah. It led me to the point of, because if you're saying the character was, you know, quite very, like, say, hammy or in a way the theme is like, you know, sterile, and the acting style is very sort of like, you know, subdued and just very clinical. It did lead me to the point of when things were happening, maybe his character wasn't changing. There wasn't actually like change, or there wasn't sort of like mood switches in the character. It might have just gone from sort of like one mood to the extreme, and there wasn't any sort of like nuance or any journey within his character. I think that might be have been the thing, because it was very focused on Emily and, you know, her son Joe and little Joe. I think
you're right, actually, because he was weird, and even when he was hitting on her, he was quite one note. Because there's this. So if anyone doesn't know, like, the movie is about this scientist who has developed a flower that they're growing in a lab with this team. That like any plant, you give it water, love, you talk to it, and it blossoms. But what the flower does is it kind of gives off this pollen that makes you happy. So it's almost like an antidepressant drug, or like a happy drug. And that the dramatic question is whether the flower is starting to exert some sort of control over its subjects, right? And so as this thing starts to unfold, as the scientist or a secondary character warns everybody, that warns the scientist that this is happening, and they don't believe her, obviously. It's only Emily Beecham's character that starts to see changes. That Ben Whishaw's character doesn't change as that change. Yeah. I mean, not in a way that I noticed, anyway.
Look what I have for you. What do you say we call him Little Joe? You have to take good care of it. Keep it warm. Talk to it. It needs attention.
What's so special about it?
It makes you happy.
No, you can't tell that he's been infected as much. Yeah, I mean, I think it's also a problem of consistency. There were times where, you know, there's a scene around the table with the son who's clearly been infected and his friend, and they become really robotic. And in that scene, it's so caricatured that it goes to that place of like, this killing of a sacred deer place, and it is really bizarre. But because the rest of the film falls into this in-between of, is this authentic, or is this sort of like more satirical or something, then it's just not fully convincing. But yeah, I think aside from the performances, I think the themes that it sort of touches on have the potential to be really interesting. You know, it is about the sort of scientists creating their own creature, their own monster, and it's sort of overpowering them or being more powerful, or having, you know, the mind of their own.
Yeah, in the Q&A before, she said she wanted to make Frankenstein, but her big reference was Frankenstein, the Mary Shelley novel, but she wanted to make it about motherhood, right?
Yeah, she wanted it to be about female scientists sort of struggling between her two babies.
Which it was, but it was so painfully just about that. Yeah. Again, like it was almost felt like a spoof of a 50s horror movie, not an interesting take that's inspired by that. Yeah. You know?
I think for me, this might have just been, I think, a problem that, well, not necessarily a problem, but something that I would have liked to have seen is, I think the CGI for me, not saying that it came across as it was very, very, not cheesy, but quite melodramatic. I think if they played on the flower blossoming and maybe not showing sort of like the pollination of it infecting the users, as an audience member, I wouldn't have known if actually this flower is doing it to these people or not.
Because part of the dramatic structure, or like part of the dramatic question is this in her head because of her situation with her son, or is it actually happening?
Exactly, but clearly seeing, you know, the pollen and what it's doing, and obviously it's sort of its process of how it will sort of like infect people to survive, because, you know, it's barren. I was a bit like, so it's the flower. Okay, so how are we going to
there's almost no real red herring or like leading on. to ask that question. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's pretty obvious that it's a supernatural, or like it's not a there's no psychological explanation. It's actually happening. What we think is happening is actually happening.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we've talked about this, but I think maybe the effect of the flower, of it, you know, it kind of just changes your personality ever so slightly, and it makes you love the flower so much that you'll do anything to protect it, and that's how it will therefore keep reproducing. I just think the premise of that just was not strong enough for this sort of Frankenstein kind of concept. I wish it had been. I actually wish it had been something a bit more visual, or because you didn't see the characters change that much. I think when characters changed and their personality sort of all of a sudden just switched, it was signaled mostly through music, which I think
and the way they talk.
Yeah. And the way they talk, yeah, but sometimes, you know, like, how much time have we spent with these characters anyways? Like, you don't... with some of them, it's very obvious, but with others,
in which case, that just reinforces the fact that if someone changed the way they talk, then it's like, well, then, yeah, they are infected. It's not in her head. We weren't given any chance to question her legitimacy as a third person narrator, if you will. You know, it's like we were talking about the turn of the screw yesterday, and how that's an example of the pure fantastic genre of not knowing whether there's a difference, not knowing if it's a scientific or a supernatural explanation. But your point is that even the music and the camera work signaled to the fact that it was the dark explanation we suspected it would be.
Yeah, I guess. And the question is, what would it have given us? Yeah, I mean, I guess, again, it's this question of what is the film really about? If it is about motherhood, I don't think I quite felt her struggling too much with motherhood. She seemed to change her mind, but she didn't.
Yeah, the only thing was that her son was moving out. Like, it was, it could, those beats could have been way more severe. Like, it could have actually made her struggle a lot more.
And I don't think in the idea that it's about motherhood because it's this plant, you know, and this plant is her baby, and I don't think she ever seriously considers killing the baby. I mean, we see her talk to her coworkers and be worried about the effects of it, and maybe want to get some genome testing to make sure it doesn't have an allergic reaction. But it's like, can we maybe see her even try to cut it, even if it needs to be that explicit?
Yeah, she only does it right at the end when she lowers the spoilers, but she lowers the temperature. But you don't even see that action. You just see the temperature gauge, and you see she's in the room, I think. But either way, the temperature is like not violent enough of an action, or it hasn't been set up enough properly so the action is violent enough for it to have any effect.
I wish we would have seen these sort of decisions of motherhood with sort of parallels between the son and the flower be, I guess, more explicit and more violent sort of questions for her, because I guess in a way it just felt like we were just experiencing the situation happen to her rather than sort of being with her, and that is a stylistic choice. And I think the director is one of those kinds of directors that makes lots of stylistic choices that make the film really great to watch. But in that, I mean, I think whenever you get into films that are maybe too stylistic for the sake of being stylistic, you lose what the story actually needed. And maybe the story needed a little bit more.
It didn't. The structure was there. It's a very traditional structure, but a lot of the beats needed changing to some. I don't know. Yeah, there was just the stakes weren't high enough, and I know that's such a bullshit note, but like it just like there wasn't. In this case, it happens to be true. Like
I would have liked to have seen maybe a bit more of a relationship with her, because she was the one who was heading, you know, this project, this plan. I would have liked to maybe have seen her struggle a bit more with the plan and in destroying it in a way, and maybe seeing the sort of like the effects that it has on Joe, and then also seeing little Joe and her struggle with the plan. Because at was one point I'd be like, okay, well, if this is basically like, you know, going to be fucking up the people, and I took it home as a mother, as a parent, and I see it actively like, you know, changing my child, well, not a mother, but if as a parent, I probably would have had a battle with that plan.
Yeah,
and then would have liked to have seen the consequences between Joe, Emily's character, the mother, and then also like her basically wanting to destroy this.
Yeah,
this
I think
there.
you're right.
That would have been very good. So
there was not a lot of internal struggle from her, and there also wasn't a lot of external. Like if I understand that the antagonist is a plant, therefore the antagonistic drama has to manifest itself in the characters that it is infecting, but there wasn't enough. It kind of just kept jumping between several characters that are or aren't infected, like that French guy with the hair, and then it's not even he wasn't even antagonizing her. There was no dramatic element scenes with her. It was just with with Bella, with the dog and all that. It just it was all over the fucking show. Man.
Yeah, I agree with that. But then sort of looking at the other side of the coin is that maybe the director wanted exactly to show that, the situation of this sort of the situation where it sort of just happens, people are in a corporate institution and they don't quite know how to fight against it because, and especially when you're in this kind of structure where your boss questions it at first, but then your boss is infected, but obviously your boss supports the project then. Mm-hmm. And, and it kind of, in a way, the subtlety of it is kind of interesting because it is more plausible where like you could find yourself in an institution where there is something that's wrong, but
in which case then I agree with you.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't need to be externally over the top, but at the same time there was I didn't get any sense of internal struggle, and you can do that,
Yeah, I mean, yeah. Well, leading off, taking from your point, it is that thing of having this, going back to Frankenstein. Frankenstein's monster, having this thing that you've essentially created that everyone is so sort of like adverse and against it, and then it being a bad thing, but then because obviously the plant has infected everyone around you, what do you do then? Because if this is your project and you are going to get some sort of like rewards for this project or this plant, I would like to maybe have seen that more really. But yeah, I did like that character because it's a bit like, oh, I've created this great thing and it's going to be amazing and it's going to do this and we want to sell it, we want to push it out. But then,
did you really get like, I didn't feel a sense of her as creator, her as God, or her as Frankenstein.
No, well, not necessarily. No, I probably wouldn't say no.
I mean, you do see her like sort of test the genomes, and you do see people question her of how she did it. But it's almost like, had we seen her, the one that feels and has the attachment to the flower like creator is more like her son, because he has to take care of it, and he's seen watering the plant, and she doesn't have this adoration for the flower like she should. I think the camera does. Mm-hmm. I think the aesthetics of the film, the director definitely has an adoration for the flower, but
it's
not
in
the
the script.
But from what I would have been interesting, who was the older lady with the mental illness?
Bella.
Bella. I think her relationship with the dog. That's not my dog, That's not my dog. That's not my animal. I think if we had something like that with Emily's character and Joe,
there wasn't enough of that's not my son.
That's not my son. That's not my son. And
also the whole thing with the dog was like a blatant, not even a foreshadowing. It was just like telling us what's going to happen.
Of course. That's the thing. And now we're like, okay, we see, definitely where this is going. But in terms of the themes of having little Joe. And I was saying this before, like, little Joe in sort of like an allusion to sort of like a penis or some sort of phallic object. And it
explain like what the plant's sterile, right? Like,
the plant's sterile, so it's barren, so it basically can't essentially like procreate, if that makes sense.
Yeah, because they're scared. It's because when they're doing the CRISPR gene editing thing, they don't want to create something terrible, and then it can just reproduce wildly.
So it reproduces through basically infecting basically anyone around it, humans, dogs, for them to protect the plant and then make it spread in that sort of way, which, spoiler alert, is what we definitely go on to what it's alluded to, that what happens in the end. But I wanted to know, I'd love to, not love to ask her, but I'd like to ask her, like, obviously playing on sort of like little Joe, meaning like, like you little Joe, you little Todger, like a little penis. Like, can that be? Is that something that she wanted to sort of like allude to in terms of like the flower? It was phallic in so many different ways, and yeah.
I mean, I think that there is a sort of allusion to a penis or some kind of phallus, because the film constantly sort of works on the premise of men not having a role.
Yeah.
You know, the man does not have a role. The father does not really have a role in the house. Ben Whishaw, who's her like romantic, could be her potential romantic interest, is very quickly shut down.
Yeah.
And again, he doesn't quite have like a role.
But then at the end of that scene where they're in the pub and he kisses her, and he kisses her a second time. Oh no, he tries to kiss her and then he actually kisses her. It was almost as if like the filmmaker wanted us to know that, like, the beat was, oh yeah, they got together. Like, it didn't seem like she should have walked out or something, because after that I was like, so are they together now, or did she reject him, or what?
Yeah, I mean, I think I just saw it as her sort of awkwardness.
Yeah, but then after that, weren't you just like, okay, are they together? It would have been better if they got together and he was like sleeping there, and it maybe him and the son had this thing with the plant, you know.
Personally, for me, I think, as you were saying, like, a lot of the men in the film were emasculated, and I feel that was a way to basically make the plant seem like it was the most dominant masculine force.
Yeah, but the thing is that the plant is the most dominant force, but in turn what the plant would do is make the man dominate again.
Okay, yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Because the plant would take over Ben Whishaw and take over the son, but she remained quite a passive character in a way. Mm-hmm. She didn't quite take initiative, and she was constantly swayed by what the male character of Ben Whishaw was sort of trying to manipulate her out of sort of telling people that there was something wrong with the plant. Mm-hmm. And it's like, yeah, I mean, I don't think she thought that deeply about it, but it kind of almost was like this perpetuation of male dominance.
Yeah.
Men have lost their role in society, and so, but this plant is obviously trying to sort of seep into society again and trying to find that role. And whether it's, you know, emotional manipulation of women, I don't know.
Haven't you noticed how Chris has changed? I think little Joe's pollen has triggered something. Little Joe changes the people he infects.
Oh, camera work. I liked it. I liked it.
The camera work was great. The opening scene, I even though we all had different thoughts about that, I thought that was good. Like how it's sort of like, you know,
it was a CCTV footage.
Yeah, and I was saying before that I would have loved for the the film to have played on that sort of like CCTV footage.
It could have worked way better with that. Yeah.
Who's watching? Because at some points, that when it first came out and you saw the pan from the overhead, bird's eye view, with Wishaw and Emily Beecham speaking about the plans and this and that, and we're going to do this. That felt very sort of like nice. But then at some parts I didn't really see that as much, and then I think I saw it again when spoiler alert, but the young child when he goes into the lab to basically with his friend or his girlfriend, and then it's like this random duck, get down, and then we see that come in again, and there might be some other times where that is in there, but I really wish that there was more of that, so it was a bit more of like a psychological sort of surveillance that
almost as if the kind of plant and the vivarium thing or the greenhouse had this 2001 autonomy to it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's what I would have liked to see more. But in terms of the actual sort of like the sort of like swaying in the pans of like of the camera, I thought that was like I did like that. It was very good. It kind of worked with the aesthetic of the pastels and all that. I just like the style of it, innit? I wanted to know what clothes they were wearing.
Yeah, the clothes are great.
The clothes are great.
Yeah, I think the clothes was great. I think the reds, the pops of red, the greens, the color. I think Emily Beecham's hair looks great with everything she wears. But the camera movement often, like what the director says, often she says it has a life of its own. But sometimes, essentially, the camera just leaves the actors.
But for no reason. Like I enjoyed it. I liked it, but it's just
for no
like
reason.
I've been thinking about it for the last 24 hours, and like I can't think of a subtext or like a reading of that camera movement as to, it doesn't have to be like, it can also just be visually interesting, which it was, and like I enjoyed it definitely, but I just when a director tells you before a film how interesting the camera work is and how it has a mind of its own and blah blah blah, like it makes me suspicious of like why are you choosing to do that, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I wish
is it maybe like the flower? I mean, is it maybe that the flower is like this omnipresent, you know,
viewer or observer?
Like,
I mean, I almost wish it was something like that. I wish it was clearer that it was. I think had all of the camera movement had this sort of surveillance feel to it.
Yeah, that's actually,
it would have really worked.
Anonymous. You know what? You know, there's a bit where the camera tracks in, and there's some like you know, the plastic flaps that they have to keep the cool and the heat out, like they have in butchers. Yeah. There's this bit where like there are people behind it, and I thought the camera was going to go through the flaps, and I thought that would be brilliant because it's almost breaking the fourth wall. You're letting the people know at the camera, but it doesn't go far enough. She hasn't got the courage to do that, you know. And so I thought like there were these great moments where the camera has a mind of its own, but it didn't go far enough for it to be like radical, but it also didn't really have I don't think it had another meaning, you know.
Yeah, I mean, I think I get the sense from this director that she was trying to do something like that, but it didn't quite come together as well as she had thought, because she does seem quite heady, and I think that you feel that in her decisions a lot. And I think that's why it's quite a fun film to like dissect in a way, because it is that heady. But then maybe we read too much into it.
But what's heady about it? I think it's a heady filmmaker making a BBC movie.
Yes. Okay, yeah.
Fear can distort our perception of reality.
If I made a mistake, then it's my fault.
It seems that this has all been a bit much for you.
He frightens me.
I'm not sure if it all came together the right way, or if she thought about it enough. But like the camera movement, something makes me think that she was trying to be sort of the surveillance item or whatever, or camera in the film, but because we didn't get that through the story, that maybe there was a surveillance element, it didn't quite come through. I think the music was obviously fantastic. I think the music was great. Was probably the best.
Not composed for the film.
Not composed for the film, but definitely found that.
Who it was, actually.
Would you have liked to have seen a more? Would you have liked to have seen the plant in a way take Little Joe take a life of its own? So maybe see from, in terms of looking at camera work, seeing the perspective of them looking out to the characters of them, you know, would you like to have seen?
That's a good idea. I didn't think about it. Like them looking into the plant, and talking to it, if the camera's
looking out of
the
them,
point of view of the plant.
Just leading, because that's then, you know, you'd feel sort of more, there'll be more sort of like empathy for the planet of it wants to be loved, it wants to be, because I thought it was going to take on this life of like everyone was kind of like was speaking to the planet, and the planet would kind of grow in that sort of way as you would raise a child. But because there wasn't really much of that, to be honest, it was like, you know, you need to speak to it. But I didn't really see much of the planet actually being sort of like raised in a way where it was, you know, turning into this like human or to this creature. I probably would have liked to have seen a bit more like
but I think that is interesting. But I guess the filmmaker was more interested in this idea of motherhood and a plant. I think that the thing is that there were so many interesting strands, but I don't really think there was something that sort of held it together at the core.
Just for the record, composer is Teiji Ito, who died in 1982. It was pre-composed music, Japanese.
Yeah, she said she composed the scenes for the music. I think the music was great. She did do that sort of Shining thing where the music is really tense throughout, and it just, I think you're just expecting something, right? Yeah. You know, you're kind of just on edge.
He did scores for Maya Deren as well.
Ah, nice.
You're a good mother. But which of your children will you choose?
night,